Hey people, welcome to the channel. Stay for this video because I'll be talking about maybe one of the most misunderstood aspects of survival and preparedness, talking about gas mask in this video. You'll understand why it's so important, why it's so often misunderstood, the entire thing of why is it I even need it? I'm not using a gas mask every single day. Well, you probably used something that was not useful at all and yet you got lucky, right? That is probably the case. If you want to learn more about survival and preparedness without any fear, paranoia, simply analyzing reality and preparing accordingly, you have the channel with a ton of information, and you have my books. This is the French version of Surviving the Economic Collapse, English version, and 3 survival skills. You have English, French, and Spanish versions. All of these are selling extremely well, so thank you to all that have bought my books, especially if you took a second and left a review. That is hugely appreciated. This is something that people associate with a loony, with a crazy guy. Why do you have a gas mask? You should be wearing this during COVID, right? No, it was never the case. A surgical mask is intended for a dentist or a surgeon, as the name implies, so as to not spit in the mouth of a client in the case of a dentist, or not to spit inside the open wound in case of a surgeon. That is all that a surgical mask is supposed to do. It will not filter a damn thing because you have open space all around your mouth. So if there's a virus out there, it will not stop it. Whatever you read that said anything else, I can just tell you that it's simply not true, and I can 100% assure you it was not a claim made by the manufacturer of these products. Not by 3M, not by Scott, not by Avon. And those are the only ones you should be listening to, like I did years ago. When all of this nonsense started, and we were told there was a lethal virus in the air, this is what I was wearing. I actually wore this for years. Now that I'm thinking about it, during the entire pandemic, this was my mask. I did not have this. I mean, I had these, right? And a lot of people use these, or a lot worse. These are actually FFP3, which is not all that bad. You have different denominations. It's going to be P1, P2, P3, FFP1, P2, P3, or whatever. Usually it's the number basically tells you the filtering capability of the actual material. So P3 is going to be filtering like over 99% of particles. I think that P1 is 90%, and the FFP2 would be the famous N95 mask because it's filtering 95% of the particles. Depending if you're in Europe, the United States, or wherever it is, you're going to have different denominations for these, but these are basically how it goes. Now, this is not what you wear when there's something dangerous in the air. This is something that you wear when you're sanding a door, when you're doing some yard work and you want to kind of avoid a little bit of that pollen. That is the kind of thing that this is for. This is not for a lethal, dangerous virus. For that, you need a proper face mask. There is a world of a difference between this and a mask that actually seals around your mouth and nose. And I'm talking about something like this. This is actually a lot better. This actually will filter what's in the air depending on the filter that you're using. This guy is using the filter that will have probably carbon in there, and he's not wearing the particle filter. So this is usually combined, right? This would be the same mask, but these use a filter that goes on top and snaps into place. Very much like you see this. You see that? I don't know if you get to see that drawing. There's a plastic case. There's a white material that's a particle filter. And then it's the actual this filter, which is the one that is visible here. Actually, that brown same color. And that's what's going to filter the fogs and the sprays. This is smaller than the particle filter is capable of stopping. Not only that, you need the carbon to absorb this stuff that will go through any of this media. This is a particle filter. You want something that stops not only particles, but the fogs and sprays and mists. That's the technical language that 3M, Avon, and Scott uses. Unless you have that, you don't have any guarantee of this stopping some of the more dangerous stuff out there. And why is it that you should even bother with this? Well, because air is kind of important for human beings, and it is a virus. And you just don't know what could happen next. Maybe next time there actually is an extremely dangerous virus that someone created in a lab and wipes half of the people out there. I just don't know. You don't know either. What I do know is that every once in a while there is a disaster or an emergency or something that happens, and you will love to have one of these things if you're ever in that situation. This could be the volcano eruption in Italy. Oh, I don't live in Italy. Well, it doesn't matter. Because wherever it is that you are, volcano ash can reach 1,000 miles away. I've seen it myself. No one told me these things. I was in Buenos Aires when there was a volcanic eruption over 1,000 miles away in Patagonia, and still the wind brought it over there. And yeah, we were fine, right? It was kind of difficult to breathe at times. And one day you woke up and everything was covered with a thin layer of what seemed like broken glass. Yeah, it's like yeah, little bits like sandy glass broken, and that's a volcanic ash. And it is terrible for your body, for your breathing. It's bad. It's not good. I just don't want to even think about even being closer to that. So that's one of the things that could happen. We are today in an environment where war is knocking on everyone's door. You just don't know when there's a strike. You don't know when this goes nuclear. You don't know when some rogue element or some black flag operation ends up with a dirty bomb that is in many ways worse than an actual nuclear warhead. The warhead is designed to become energy. All of that material, right, will become energy in a massive explosion. This is why in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, where the United States actually dropped nuclear bombs on civilian population, there's still people living in those places. But if you look at Chernobyl, where there was no nuclear war, there was no nuclear explosion, that was a nuclear power plant that had a massive accident, and a lot of that radioactive material ended up in the open, and that's why hundreds of years later it will still not be viable for life. You will not be able to live there. Massive difference between what is called a dirty bomb that does that kind of thing, drops a lot of radioactive material everywhere, and an actual nuclear warhead. In many ways, yeah, the nuke is actually less bad than some asshole throwing a bunch of radioactive material and contaminating God knows how much part of the planet, all right? So all of these things are why you need one of these things. Now, it's not maybe the first thing I run buying if I'm getting into preparedness, but the moment you start getting serious about this, you need to understand that air and the ability to breathe is crucial. And you don't get around it with this. This is okay for I mean, I've done videos showing how to improvise a respirator with a coffee filter right when the COVID thing started. It's better than nothing, guys. There's records of during World War I, mustard gas being used, and the guys, poor guys, were using a cloth mask in which they would urinate on because that would actually stop and neutralize the agent, and it actually worked. It probably saved a lot of lives. Now, do you want to wear a piss rag face, a piece of a shirt soaked in urine to save your life? No, you want to have something better, which is not this. Have a bunch of these, but understand when things get really bad, when there's a serious threat, this is what you want. And these are fine, but they will not cover your eyes. My advice is go with something that covers your entire face. And so as to not make the video super long and making this, which I could talk about for a couple hours easily, my advice, and pay attention, is buy the mask that you can afford. And within what you can afford, if you can afford the best one, that's probably gonna be the Avon M50 currently used by the US military. Buy that, buy the Avon M50, and buy a bunch of cartridge, filtering cartridges, which it uses. That is probably the best mask you can buy today. Now, if you want to buy, and this, by the way, this is a GSR, this is a general service respirator, same generation as the M50. This one, though, is a little bit more controversial, and there's criticism, and there were problems in the production and whatnot. Now, in my opinion, well, that's not just my opinion, because my opinion is based on the information that I gathered, and I know there's been problems with these, but in my experience of actually using this for, unfortunately, a very long time, like everyone else during the pandemic, this worked. I did not get sick, and every time I tested, you wouldn't even smell perfume or deodorant when you use that in a room. That shows you that this works. When someone says, "Oh, can you smell a fart when you're wearing that?" Well, that is actually not just a joke. That's actually very real. If you can smell anything, there's something going in. This will not be the case. Nothing goes in with these things on, as far as I use this for way beyond the time in which you're supposed to replace these every 24 hours in the worst environment and fallout and whatnot. I use this for years and it's still doing the job. So yeah, at least in my case, it works just great. But if you want to buy the best mask in terms of how much you can get for your money, my advice is this. Go with a full face mask made by a reputable and known manufacturer. I'm talking about 3M. I'm talking about Drager. These guys make very good masks, by the way. These German guys, Drager. These ones are very good too. Scott or Avon. Those would be the biggest ones. There's Mira as well. So there's a bunch of others. But go with something that is recognizable, that has a reputation on the line. Don't go and buy the cheapest piece of shit on AliExpress. You may end up regretting that. It may be the worst mistake you make. Now, these use proprietary cartridges, and these, as I said, are very, very good. Now, being the next generation mask, you have better visibility, and these were replacing the older ones. This is the S10, which is one of the masks that a lot of people that are into masks will always say, oh, it was so much better than this one. Well, I don't know, man. Having used this one for a while and having used this one a lot, this one is much better. You breathe a lot better with this. At least every time I tested, it did work. So I didn't have any of the problems that I know were an issue. The sealing is still pretty good. A little bit messy on the gluing there, but every time I tested it, it worked. And I didn't get sick for as long as I used this. This will do the job. But keep in mind, with the S10 or this previous generation of masks, which is a bunch of them similar, these use the much easier to find 40mm NATO cartridge. You want to go with something that uses this, right? Why? Because this is the one that is the most easily available NBQ cartridge, the one that is nuclear, biological, and chemical filtering. This is the way in which you're reassured that you're safe when there's something very bad out there. Now, these will not allow you to breathe while you have this out. Yeah, you will actually suffocate if you're not wearing a cartridge. So the filter, the canister, so you actually need to wear this. And if you need to replace it in the middle of the mess, you have to hold your breath, remove it, hold, suffocating. Well, you can breathe again. And this is a lot easier because you can replace one at a time. So even though if you remove both, you will also suffocate, you can replace one at a time. You can rotate it depending on the buttstock of your rifle. You can remove one entirely to get a nicer shot if that's the case. But having two is better. So people complaining about how heavy and bulky, dude, of course, you're wearing a damn mask that makes you look like fucking Darth Vader. But that also means it is very much more comfortable to breathe in, and air flows beautifully well with these two things in there, right? I think you can put two if you replace this part here. But anyway, man, I think that this is a lot more, even though technically for a lot of people they consider this one to be higher quality, this one is more modern and better, like so many other things, you know. My advice is that quality mask that uses 40mm NATO filters. That's the way in which you're sure that you will have the best product, something that's full face. Goggles are fine, but full face, even better. A mask that does the job, that's it, okay? This one, by the way, the GSR, something that's maybe not as known, you can use the proprietary filters, which I have a bunch of these because I do believe these are very well made. These are super high quality, right? Whatever went wrong with the mask or why they changed from Scott to Avon, but you can remove this. And if you remove, this is actually an adapter. So if you remove this adapter, that's really not that hard. You just have to click a couple plastic pieces and turn it. But you can remove this and actually use the 40mm NATO filter here as well on both sides. So it's going to use these ones, and you can go with the proper, well, not the proper, because I believe that this is much better, right? It's not that I believe. I know this flows much better. So you can either use these or removing the adapter, use a 40mm. So this is why I like the GSR. I will say it, the M50 is technically, I believe, better and better construction. So that's that. If you can afford it, buy the M50. If you want to get your GSR, if you find one in good condition, go. And if you find one of the older masks, my advice is be very careful with some of the surplus ones, because the plastic valves, all of those things, they will rot. and the rest of the mask has a lifespan. So if you find an older mask that is in very good shape, but man, I honestly advise you to go with a modern, quality-made manufacturer, current production by Draggers, 3M, Scott, or any of these guys, and go with that uses a 40mm filter, something that's going to be kind of like this, sealed in a bag. Okay, folks, that's going to be all for now. See you on our next video. Take care.